Welcome, everybody. We have just arrived to the seventh appointment with More Than Monday. It's the last appointment in this season, but we restart in fall. And what is One Man Monday? Is a place, a virtual place dedicated to the themes of creativity, Italian design, and international, to a place to share subjects of inspiration to understand the past and to imagine the future. You can have a translation of this meeting in Italian. And now I'm a great pleasure to introduce you Thomas Girst. I met Thomas Girst, I think, 4 years ago in a meeting organized by Guggenheim Intraprese in Bologna, and was very fascinated by the title of Thomas Girst because he is science the 2003 head of cultural engagement at BMW Group. It's very interesting this role of Thomas because it's very important that companies like BMW has an office that is completely dedicated to the cultural engagement. But Thomas is not only the head of this department of BMW, is also a very nice person that I meet in Venice because Thomas was a lecturer at IED in Venice. Also, he is a lecturer in a different university in German, in Spanish, in other very prestigious school. And also is an author of different books about arts. The last books of Thomas is also translated in Italian with the title of Tutto il tempo che ti rimane. And he's a very nice person because he's a very polyedric person. He has a lot of interesting and is very deep in art and the cultural engagement and in the situation about what happened in the art world. Today, Thomas will have with us, we offer to us lecture magistralis dedicated to something, to a subject that is very, very contemporary, and the title is Culture and Business, Post-Pandemic Alliance, and is based about a reflection what happened after pandemic in relationship between the culture and business. What will change? What happened? And what will be the role of the new technologies inside of the relationship with the culture? So thank you very much, Thomas, to be here, and I can leave the stage to you. Thank you. Sorry?
First of all, Igor, thank you so much. You're very kind to introduce me like this. I know we've known each other for quite a few years, and it's always great to come up and do something also for IED, and knowing that there's a lot of people interested in what is going on when it comes to culture and business. And I know we only have a limited amount of time, and I want to make this Monday worth your while. So let's jump right in terms of what I wanted to say. And it's hopefully safe to discuss what is happening post-pandemic with the arts and culture. And we have to have a pragmatic assessment here in terms of what has been going on, because what has been going on has been really devastating. So there's nothing around this to make that assessment realistically in terms of what has been going on. The cultural sector is the one that, besides aviation, was the most hit. That you might know or not know that the overall revenue of in culture with Europe is about 643 billion euros, which is a lot. And you have 28,000 museums when we talk about the arts in Europe alone, which accounts for about 30% of all the museums in the world. So a lot has been going on in the past 2 years in terms of lockdowns, in terms of things not happening, in terms of artists that did not know where to turn or where to thrive, not able to perform, not able to practice, and all of that. And I'm not here to put a sugarcoating on this devastating situation for artists as individuals, but also for cultural institutions. And it's interesting to me, of course, to see cultural institutions, especially museums, that have been preaching a lot about their audience, that they want it to be more diverse, less educated, less affluent, that now, of course, all of these people, or many of these people, the less affluent, the more diverse, the less educated, had to be let go by museums around the world. There is an estimate that 1/3 of 726,000 people employed in the arts in the US alone will lose their jobs due to the pandemic. And I think it was Warren Buffett who once said that only during times of the low tide, you actually see who wasn't wearing any pants. So, of course, there's a backlash now. There were a lot of museums proclaiming a lot of things when it comes to audience development, and now not actually walking the walk, but having talked the talk, because we see that now, once the crisis hits, what is actually happening in the museum world and in the cultural world as such. But I'm an optimist, and not only because, you know, I love what I do, working for culture on the business side of things and making things possible that hopefully don't only add or not add to the bling bling of things. Although, you know, we're a car manufacturer, luxury premium car manufacturer on the side of BMW, so of course we need to cater to our target audiences. But at the same time, culture is such a precious thing that I do believe that we also want to create meaning, or help meaning to be created, do something meaningful, you know, help and sustain artists, not only jump from event to event, but be there in the long term, give planning security to our cultural partners, and be long-term partners, be sustainable partners, you know, really take serious your social engagement, your corporate social responsibility, by never interfering with content, of course, but by helping the arts when they need it most. Because partnerships, as you know from your own personal partnerships, you know, you walk together well when the wind is coming from behind, and you're all just happy to run or walk or be together. But when the wind is blowing straight into your face, what does that mean, you know, for your partnership, for your cultural partnership, for things that you've been through, that you have experienced? And I do believe that continuity is, you know, very special and very important when it comes to those alliances between culture and the arts, between the business and the arts. So continuity is a very important factor. And continuity is also what we were able to provide for our cultural partners right through the pandemic. You know, when our numbers in our core business didn't quite add up, we nevertheless thought it would be best and would be the right thing to do if we continue to support those that needed the most, those that oftentimes were, were not supported as much by the public sector as they should have been, you know, through the time of the pandemic. But allow me to just quote Yuval Noah Harari, who said, you know, when he was asked about how do we get out of this pandemic, he said that either, we will isolate ourselves as nationalities, or we will thrive in international solidarity. So you have international solidarity and you have nationalist isolation. Of course, you can think about what is good and what is best, and where culture can thrive. So I would always go for the latter, for international solidarity, but I wouldn't want to use the term solidarity and all of its connotations from the culture wars. I would rather go with the term alliances. And alliances is what I have seen and come into place in the past year and a half. Of course, you all know that the internet, everything with digitalization, everything with social media has really thrived. All of this technology was there before. I mean, even the way that I'm able to talk to you now and engage you in my little More Than Monday talk has been around, but has not been used, has not been put to use as much as it could have been. And I believe that those things are now meant to stay. So whether we need the analog geography and architecture of a cultural event, let's say a theater, an opera, a museum, at the same time, we can reach out to new audiences around the world globally, and engage with them, via, of course, the digital transformation, which now has taken hold and it's not meant to leave. And I think it's so much more for the better. So when I talk about alliances, I really mean corporations. And I've seen fantastic things going on. You have a $60 billion art market going on, at least prior to the pandemic. And you had all these big galleries like Gagosian, like David Zwirner. Just to give you an example, David Zwirner, for example, opened up his digital platform, to make room for younger galleries that were struggling through the pandemic to also be able to showcase their work on his platform, which I thought was a really commendable thing to do. The president of Christie's in London let me know that they opened up their showrooms, which weren't needed because all of the auctions were going on digitally, to show artists that were part of the I-54 or 154 rather African Contemporary Art Fair in October last year. So all of a sudden it's this sharing of power, which makes me hopeful going on into the future. And collaborations also for cultural institutions as well as for businesses are the way to go ahead. When we look at, Apple teaming up with MasterCard, or Supreme teaming up with Louis Vuitton, those brands are already very strong, but you can become stronger growing something together, which I see happening more and more without always being a little reluctant, to share what it is that your brand stands for with another brand, with another cultural institutions. If we stick to the genres that we all are used to working in, I believe that could be, adding to the death throes of culture and transporting its meaning into the next generation. Because at the end of the day, what is culture? And I think it is something that is as important for companies to recognize as it is for cultural institutions and artists themselves, who should see themselves as brands. How do you win, the attention competition out there? How do you make a difference with what it is that you have to offer, which I think is very important. Everybody has to go through the motions of this thought experience to consider yourself a brand. Because the best definition of what a brand is, I've heard by, I think it was some ad person in the 1960s in New York City. Think of Mad Men, the series, if you saw it. A brand is a piece of real estate in somebody else's mind. So if a brand is a piece of real estate in somebody else's mind, if you talk about a cultivated brand like BMW, maybe that piece of real estate is not only a place where a car, beautifully designed car, hopefully sustainable electrified car, will be placed, and maybe a garage around it, but also maybe a gallery, maybe a museum, maybe an opera house. And that is important when you cultivate that brand as a piece of real estate in somebody else's mind. That is just as important for cultural institutions as it is for companies. And hopefully we meet in the middle, because culture is way too important to be negligent about it. And it's a sanctuary of beauty and depth. It's a refuge, and it's very far from the hustle and bustle of the everyday and from the turbo capitalist survival of the fittest, or in this case, survival of the busiest. It is something, that connects us with others that have been on this planet dozens, hundreds, if not thousands of years ago. I say it again and again, but there's nothing better than what Charles Baudelaire has once phrased as that through culture, also, of course, through science and other things, but through culture, we can give off light beams to each other like lighthouses along the nightly shore. So no matter how many thousands of years some bright mind that walked the planet, has worked and written or created something, we can still connect to that person while we move ahead into the future. We're never alone. We're always standing on the shoulders of giants. And I want to quote Fabio Mauri because I'm talking, I would think, mostly to an Italian audience. And he said once that art renders the invisible visible, as thoughts and feelings, impressions and experiences. And that is what culture is about. And that is also, I believe, what the alliance between culture and companies can offer. If we don't want to end up on the side of the bling bling with content being completely empty in a way, and we want to create something meaningful together, we should have that conversation. And I think that companies are willing to have that conversation as they move away from, the bigger events, more to something that goes into the direction of education, of making culture available, of through digitalization, through the transformation that is happening in society, reach new audiences through new digital tools. And that is where companies, without ever interfering with the content of arts that they support, can come in with their know-how and with their network. BMW itself has been active in the arts on a global scale for 50 years. So if you go into a partnership with curiosity and respect for each other, you can delve into that network. You can delve into that sort of know-how. There's no law in the world, in any country, that asks businesses or requires of businesses rather to get involved in culture. So all that companies do is being done because they want to do it. There's no request because they think it might be a good idea to get engaged. And then, of course, you don't only want to be the cash cow sitting at the table. You want to engage with culture and also bring something else to the table. Turn this into a partnership where, you talk at eye level with each other and not just, and where it's an interaction and not just a transaction where it's just about a monetary transfer going from A to B. Because then, as a company, you can also be interchangeable. You could be any company. And you don't want to be any company, but you want to stand for certain values. And it's about the character of the company. It's about corporate citizenship. And I do think that this has a base. And of course, now I have a big echo when I speak. Oh, not anymore. Okay. I hope you can hear me. So not to lose sight of what I wanted to say is that also artists, have great things that are happening for them by making use of the platforms that are available. When we talk about digitalization and we talk about the internet, of course, there's always this culture of free content on the internet. So artists who put up a lot of things, showing themselves, making music in their own rooms, painting and whatnot, are doing this for free. And artists are the ones, of course, suffering from the crisis. If you're not government-employed artists that plays music in an orchestra, like in most of the places of the world, you're not. You have to make your own living, not by being a state employee. So there's great platforms that also made amazing inroads like Patreon, like GoFundMe, and OnlyFans. Patreon in 2019, I think, had a revenue of 500 million euros or dollars. That's not that is a great amount of money, and it all goes back to something that Kevin Kelly, the co-founder of Wired magazine, already said in 2008, which is 13 years ago. He said that if every artist had 1,000 true fans, and every fan would give to an artist $100 per year, that is less than $10 a month, then this artist could thrive. This artist could really, delve into whatever it is that they do artistically, to be supported by his fans or those that want to support them. And so there are all these new ways of generating revenue for artists if you get the word out there, and also for cultural institutions if you know whom to ask, and if you are really savvy about defining what it is that makes you unique. Because no matter what you think is going out there, there is an attention competition going out there, and you want to win that attention competition, whether you want somebody to buy your cars or whether you want somebody to visit your museum or your orchestra or your opera house, be it online or be it in person, be it analog or be it digital. So define what it is. And here we are again in terms of defining you as a brand, whether you like that or not, you are. There's an attention competition out there. So what is your USP? What is your unique selling point? What sets you apart from others? And you have to build on these strengths. You have to recognize those strengths to then be able to address those where you think a match could be made in terms of businesses that might be able to support you, that might want to support you, or in terms of individuals that want to join whatever it is that you're doing or support you in this sort of way. This, I think, is something of a learning in terms of the post-pandemic times that we live in. What is not helping, and that is something that I realized in my research also, is that for over 200 years now, and I would say in the German-speaking countries, ever since Immanuel Kant, who defined culture as this disinterested pleasure, with the importance of disinterestedness, with the importance of something that is sort of purposelessness, as opposed to what capital is doing, as opposed to what companies, what business is doing. Ever since that definition from the mid-18th century, going all the way to the Frankfurt School of Thought, which, all these philosophers I hold dearly, and you could see them right behind in my library, all lined up. But let's say even with Theodor Adorno's definition of culture in his Minima Moralia, or his culture industry term, something that he already wrote about in the 1940s together with Marcuse, when they were defining culture as something that is really to be set apart from the dominance of the material world. I completely understand that there have to be places in society, and I'm happy that the German government is spending $12 billion a year on the cultural sector. I'm happy that these cultural institutions are able to exist, but to always define them for over 200 years against the material world sets a demarcation line that actually shouldn't be there. Of course, you have to be critical of where money is earned. Always follow the money. Milton Friedman said, the only business of business is business. He said that in the 1950s. So, be wary of why are companies going into the arts. But of course, it's done for their image, for the visibility, for their reputation. But at the same time, they might really be corporate citizens. They might want to return something to society that they do successful business in. So be critical, but at the same time, don't hold your grudges. Don't define yourself as being positioned against the material world, because at the end of the day, money comes in to you from somebody else, whether you're an artist or a cultural institution. Somebody wants what it is that you sing about or paint or create. And that is, I think, important to realize. And that's where your criticality should actually take a little break. And you have to look internally in terms of follow the money. Where does it come from? I have not seen a cultural institution ever who makes more than 30% through partnership money coming in or through ticket sales, at least in Germany, where 1/4 or 1/3 is already a lot of budget that is coming in through other sources, whereas the rest is being taken care of by the government. So, and that money from the government is coming in because of tax revenue of successful business enterprises that give this money to the government, so the government can, among many other things, of course, support the arts. We're all in support of supporting the arts, and we all know, thanks to Richard Florida, that in post-industrial societies, such as Germany or most Western democracies, the creative class is also a business factor, for sure. It's also something that is driving the business. That is taken for granted. But when I'm speaking, let's say in India or some other places where the post-industrial status is not quite achieved, and for 1.3 billion people, we have one single state-supported, government-supported museum of contemporary art for 1.3 billion people, the infrastructure has to be created. And that is where, public policy comes in, and also companies should be coming in, not because they have to, but because they can. And but having said all that, it does remain important that you know how to create a business case, no matter what cultural institution you're working for, because otherwise things happen as they happened in the pandemic, where just thousands upon thousands of people were let go by cultural institutions. So it wasn't based on as solid numbers as this probably should have been based on, in order to also somehow cushion the downfall of what has affected us all in the past year and a half. I could go on and on and on, but I do believe that I have 25 minutes, which I now have taken up the time for. And I'll just be very happy and delighted to engage in any sort of conversation that we might be having, or questions that you might be having. I'm happy to discuss and delve deeper into what I have said. I understand it was more of a freewheeling, free associative talk in terms of how do we get out of the pandemic, but I hope I got some points across, and I hope it did enrich your Monday somewhat. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. The first question is by me, and is a reflection about what happened in different countries. You say that in Germany there is a very deep approach and support art, and with different billion that tour. And as you know, in Italy we have a different problem, because we have a problem that we have a big heritage, and we have no money to support this kind of heritage. As you know, I mean, the problem of what happened in Pompeii, what happened in a lot of places in Italy. There is no money to support, to conserve this heritage. And I don't know, I hope that this privation that we support to have a relationship with museum, what happen in arts, what happen in opera, and what else, and is a push to the Italian companies to create this alliance that is not so common in Italian. Is better in other countries, but in Italian it's not so common. I don't know why. I think this I like a first step. In this first step, some countries, some companies are understanding that it's very important to support art. I like the example of Thoughts that support in the restoration of Colosseum, or Fendi that support the restoration of Fontaine in Rome, but as you know, are not so common for the companies in Italy about this. And I hope that will be something that will be more common, and because I think that to invest in arts and to invest in culture is something that gives back to the companies and a reputation, but also a value very important. But what is the situation on your side, on your view, in the other countries about this?
I have to turn the volume on as always. So I know the situation in Italy for sure. And when you talk about Italian heritage, I would always like to argue that this is, of course, the cradle of European heritage. So this should be of importance, to all of us. First of all, there is the responsibility and obligation in a democratic a government, in a civil society, to support the arts. This cannot be something that companies are being asked to do, and if they don't, then things crumble apart or fall apart, like literally in Italy, as you just described. This must be something that the government provides for. It's also, I think, something when we look at Germany as a federalist country, that you have opera houses even in small villages, for people to take part of culture. Of course, we should make no mistake that the situation in Germany is like this because we were the most horrendous nation on the face of the earth between 1933 and 1945, where culture was raped, where culture was used in the worst shape and form, where artists were killed and persecuted and whatnot. So I do believe that, coming out of World War II, Germany had to somewhat also prove, its humanity by putting a lot of the budget into the arts and showing that we are, after all, or at least striving to be, an open society. And this is somewhat of a consent up until today, and I'm very happy about it. But it doesn't make us forget, the horrors that we have wreaked upon the earth, that culture is so important for, a civil society to live in. And that is strong. And that also needs to be thought of into the future. Maybe in the future we'll not have an opera house in every little village again, but maybe something that is really catering to younger people without watering down the complexities. So first of all, it would always, for me, be about the responsibility of the government, of a civil society that is open. Because we see what happens otherwise. We see that once culture is, and we see that in countries like Hungary, we see it in Poland, where culture is being neglected in a way that it is only speaking in, for the nation itself, whereas culture thrives when it is being thought of as internationally. At the same time, I'm very hopeful. I wrote my PhD on art and literature in Japanese American internment camps. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, there were 120,000 Japanese Americans, of which 2/3 were actually American citizens, were interned for 3 to 4 years. And I looked into how can arts actually come into being when all the coordinates around the arts are being put against culture. You have censorship, you have propaganda, you have manipulation, and you have no material to create arts. But the arts are so important and crucial to the humanities on this planet, to create something beautiful, or even something controversial. It hasn't anything to do with morals, but art always thrives, no matter whether there is an institution or not. So that actually makes me hopeful. But I would always like to argue on the side of cultural institutions, when the government takes care of its responsibility, that the conversation with companies can be had by making it clear to companies, not only when it comes to the corporate citizenship, but also when it comes to their potential target audience, clients and customers, that if you do it intelligently, with a lot less budget than, let's say, with sports. I'm not against sports. I'm happy this is happening, but that you can do a lot of things. And that, of course, it's sometimes easier to wrap your head around sports and people having your logo on the shirt, but it cannot only be about that. Culture has so much to offer. With a lot less funding, you can reach a lot more visibility, reputation, and do something for the image of your company when it comes to getting engaged there. I would never, give up that fight.
My microphone. There's some other questions. Okay, I think will appear. Oh my God. It's very little for me. Do you read the question? Because it's very.
I can read the question. I think it's a great question.
Okay, for me it's too little.
coming in from Sarah, I believe.
Yes.
I think Sarah, that is very true.
Consequences by COVID are not the same to everyone. There are people affected more than others because under status, culture, and wealth. Do we want to promote culture as something for the new or an opportunity within a reach of all?
I think this is a great question. And when it comes to, let's say, the core business of BMW, we consider ourselves, with the brands Rolls-Royce, of course, and Mini, a premium car manufacturer. Yeah. So you would think premium car manufacturer stands for luxury. So we only cater to those, that will be able to afford our cars. But that would be, go against what culture and luxury actually should be, and that should be availability. So I do agree with you. And for the past, we've been active in the arts for 50 years, and I can only say that we have in Berlin, in Munich, in Moscow, in London, also in Milano and in Shanghai, we have done something that we call music for all, opera for all, classic for all, where regardless of whether people are being able to afford our cars, what we want to do is have them partake in the beauty of culture for free, offered by us. We don't want to interfere with the listener listening to a great opera. We don't want to interfere with the viewer looking at a work of art. But we want to make this possible. We want to create that platform together with cultural institution to really broaden the possibilities of audiences, digital and analog, to engage in the arts, because I believe that the arts should be available to everyone. And I'm just very happy to report that, the complete works of Shakespeare are completely free, available online. So the best things in life are free, and culture should be one of those things. We know that the production of culture isn't free, and we know that all of those involved in culture have to be paid, which is why you have to pay your artists, whether you're a company or whether you're a gallery or whether you're a museum. But it should be made available to as many people as possible. I would say not for the ethics of humankind, but for the possibility of empathy, because we can read Dostoevsky and know exactly what is going on in the Crime and Punishment in the head of a murderer. So this doesn't necessarily have to do with morals and right and wrong, but it has to do with empathy. And I believe that the possibility of empathy is something essential, for the well-being of humankind on this planet. Yeah, how to re-engage.
How to re-engage the public under the current safe condition?
I would say do it digitally, of course. There's great possibilities, but it's time We had Ann-Sophie Mutter, the fantastic violinist in Berlin, host a concert for only 2,000 people where there should have been 40,000 people listening to Beethoven's Ode to Joy. Not only the European national anthem or European anthem, there's no nationalities in Europe, or at least there are 28, but there's usually 40,000 people listening to Daniel Barenboim conduct. And there was Ann-Sophie Mutter, who had suffered from COVID, who said, music is love, music is the remedy. And it was so important to host that concert only for 2,000 people because of safety regulation, and not for 40,000 people who would have otherwise been there. But we didn't piss off the 38,000 people that weren't able to come to the square, because we said, look, we only got 2,000 tickets. Let's give it to those that were working hardest in the pandemic. The people working in the supermarket, the doctors, the nurses, those first responders. And through the unions, actually, through the working unions, we got the tickets out to them, and they were happy to have been thought of. So it's also important to recognize that now is the time to open, however safely. Do it now, because you're sending out beams of hope that things will happen again. And yes, we lost an entire generation, maybe, of an audience, 16 months, 18 months of shutdowns and lockdowns. And we don't know whether it's over or fourth wave coming in fall. But at the same time, we have to win them back. And we can win them back by, trying to also cultivate, the young ones to come and see the opera or listen to the classical music. Not only have them come to us, but we come to them via the digital transformation that is going on. And we have a pretty good chance, not to lose the culture that we have been building up for hundreds and hundreds of years. But we have to make it more accessible. We have to make it more diverse. We have to make it and create it for the less affluent and for the less educated. Otherwise, we won't stand a chance of being around in another 100 years.
Not a new renaissance, but we can speak about the second renaissance. What is, or the new opportunity to have a second renaissance for me is happened because you imagine that the renaissance come after the pandemic, the pest. So I think that will be something that will change. I think what's because the privation of the freedom, the privation of the opportunity to meet person, to do something together, to meet family, and also to do a museum, to visit to an opera in presence of what else will be the possibility to create a new renaissance. And I think that's a lot of young generation, because I think that the young generation, the young person would be the generation that suffer more for this pandemic. I think because it's difficult that you can give back the sensation of the approach, of the feeling when he was 15, 17, and what else. And I think also that also the experience, because there is a culture that is opera music, rock music, pop music, and you can imagine that when you was 15, 17, 18, you go to a concert, and they didn't have this for 3 years. And I think this will be a big push for the future about this, and I'm very confident that will be a second renaissance for this. For maybe we need for this, because as we are a society that are a little bit going affected by something that is not a pandemic, but something a heal of the culture, and a little bit. In French, we say ennui, annoiato, and I think that this is something that we can, us and the new generation, to create something new about this. And there is another question. Sorry.
Nico, when we speak about the second Renaissance, I think the one thing that we have to both realize, especially us two talking, is that we are, with all that we try to do, is that we have to recognize first and foremost that we're also a part of the problem and not only of the solution. We're talking as two white middle-aged male men, and it is so important to open this up. It is so important especially when we speak about a Renaissance, to not look at it from a Eurocentric point of view. We have to become. There are so many narratives that have been neglected, that have not been looked at, that will occupy us for hundreds of years to come if we delve into who has been around and who hasn't been seen or who hasn't been heard. And that is, I think, essential, unearthing what has already been, creating very different narratives from the narrative that we hold precious up until today. Not that there haven't been good things coming out of this, but it's very much important for others to now have a say and to thrive in culture and to get the platforms that we have had exclusively for ourselves.
Yes, but another word that I think about when during the pandemic is, and I think will be after pandemic, is an English word is restart. But inside the word restart, you have the terms art, that we can restart, to have a new way with art. I think that will be a chance for us, that art will be the something that help us to have a new way in the future. And I'd like very much to think at the words restart in this mean, because you have rest, that is something that is your remain, and art, that is something that and the word restart is something that move to another place. There is other question. Okay. How do you plan to structure strategy for culture? Oh my God. That's very complex question.
Well, I think what is important is to have a strategy in place. Yeah. I really want to do things proactively instead of just reactively. I have 2,000 inquiries coming up on my desk every year, from cultural institutions, artists from around the world. And it was very hurtful, of course, to see that as part of these many inquiries asking for funding or support, there were then a lot of artists coming in that were struggling because of the pandemic. So we tried as much as we could do, also, through our foundational work and donating a budget, to students that were struggling. So this is, I think, what is important in your question is that there should be a structure and a strategy. And while we come out of this pandemic, it's also for companies a big fight for budget. Yeah, if we reap in less revenue, it's harder for me to get budget for cultural engagement within the company. But that said, we know the value of continuity. I would just think that as much as there are new audiences out there, for example, when they did a charity auction at a major museum here in Germany, as they did every year, to get money for acquisitions for that Museum of Contemporary Art, they only had about 60,000 from the government for new acquisitions. Through fundraising auctions where artists were giving their works for free to the museum because the museum had shown them before, they were always reaping in 1 million euros, for the museum to buy more artworks, acquire more artworks. So now that they did this during the pandemic, in the digital platform with an online auction, charity auction, they all of a sudden made 3 million euros because they had buyers in the United States. They had buyers in Asia, in China, and so forth. So these things play out. Now they will do every auction, of course, even if it's no longer necessary, online as well, because they know they will make 3 times as much money. So what I'm saying is, in terms of structure, try to branch out, try to reach new audiences. The tools are all there. If your intelligence allows for it and your sense of abstraction, then I think, there is a silver lining or a light at the end of the tunnel.
Okay. I think the time at disposal is just finished. And I want to say great thank you to you, Thomas. I hope you will be a lecturer at my master in Florence. I moved to Florence, that I want to have you as the master in Florence. It's an honor.
I need to see the Uffizi, so I'm coming, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. That's in this moment. It's fantastic because there are not more people that visit the Uffizi, because the tourism is not so big number of tourists inside the city. So in this moment, Florence is a fantastic city because you have all the monuments that you want at your disposal, and it's fantastic. So thank you very much to you, Thomas, and for a very interesting lecture. And you give out a lot of suggestion, and thank you very much for sharing with us your experience. And thank you for the audience, thank you for your students, and so we can say goodbye for the next edition on More Than Monday, that will be in fall. Thank you very much to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Igor. Thank you so
Great.
much. This was fun. Bye-bye.
I wait for you in Florence.
I bring this with me.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.